I'll never forget the moment my own daughter told me I didn't deserve to eat at my family's Thanksgiving table. She looked me dead in the eye in front of my grandkids and said, "Dad, you didn't contribute this week." Don't make it awkward. I was holding an empty plate in my hands, standing there like a stranger in the home I helped her buy. Everyone else just kept passing dishes, the sound of forks and knives clinking like nothing had happened. My grandson, Ben, tried to hand me a roll, and she snapped at him to sit down. I stood frozen, humiliated, feeling the sting of every sacrifice I had ever made for her. Before we continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I should back up. My name's Jim Hollis. I'm 64, retired diesel mechanic out of the UPS hub in Sharonville. When my wife Linda passed in 2022, I moved in with my daughter Cara and her husband Trent in Mason, Ohio. They told me it was my home too. That's what they said. Since then, I've been paying $650 a month toward what they call utilities. That's their number, not mine. On top of that, I fix everything that breaks around here. Last winter it was the Lennox furnace. In June it was the Whirlpool washer. I even keep Trent's Honda Odyssey running when he's between paychecks. And yet, somehow, on Thanksgiving Day, I was treated like a freeloader. Here's the part that might spark debate. A week earlier, Cara had locked the Nest thermostat at 67 degrees. She said the Duke energy bill was out of control. She even put a pin on it so I couldn't change it when the house felt like a meat locker. I bit my tongue, told myself she was just stressed. I tried to focus on the kids. Thanksgiving morning, I went to Kroger, bought pies and cream cheese and some extra things for dessert. The receipt was $118.43. I slipped it in my shirt pocket without thinking. That small detail didn't matter at the time. But later, when Cara blocked me at the table, her words cut deeper than she realized. "Don't make it awkward," she said. And then Trent smirked, leaned back in his chair like he owned the place, and added, "Grown men pay their way." That's when I remembered the receipt in my pocket, the one from Kroger. I pulled it out and laid it on the table in front of them. I bought the pies, the whipped cream, the cranberry sauce you're eating right now. I said it calm, but my voice shook. Cara barely glanced at it. "That's your personal snacks, Dad." Don't twist things. The room went quiet. My grandkids stared at me, confused. Ben asked, "Why can't Grandpa eat?" And Cara told him, "Because responsibility matters. Grandpa has to learn that." That's when the anger started to bubble under the humiliation. Responsibility? I paid $15,000 from Linda's life insurance for their down payment, back in 2021. I've been covering the Spectrum bill for the kids' online classes. When Trent's commission checks didn't clear, I covered Ben's speech therapy copays. All of it was invisible the moment turkey hit the table. I wanted to explode, but I didn't. I looked at Linda's plate. Our old heirloom stoneware Cara only sets out for display now, and I placed my empty one down beside it. I said, "Okay, Cara, you want contributions? You'll get them. Just not the kind you think nobody said a word." The Cowboys game kept playing in the background. The smell of turkey filled the room, and my hands stopped shaking. I was humiliated, but underneath it all, something else was waking up. A cold clarity I hadn't felt in years. I pushed back my chair and stood up. Cara shot me a look, maybe thinking I was going to beg. Instead, I walked away from that table without touching a single bite of food. What they didn't know was that every move I'd made over the past 2 years, every payment, every repair, every signature, had left a trail. A trail I could follow back, line by line, to prove just who had been carrying who. And as I climbed the stairs to my room, the receipt still on the table behind me, I knew exactly what I had to do. Because the next time we all sat around that table, it wouldn't be me standing there with an empty plate. It would be them. When I walked away from that Thanksgiving table, I thought maybe Cara and Trent would cool off, maybe even feel guilty. But the truth hit me hard the very next morning when I logged into my old Fifth Third account. That's when the real betrayal started to unfold. one detail at a time. For years, I've let Cara handle some of my payments. It started simple. She said it would be easier if my $650 utilities went straight into her account. I set up an automatic transfer. At first, I didn't think twice. She's my daughter, right? But now I noticed something off. Every month, the transfer was being swept out within the same hour it hit, and the label on those withdrawals read, Hollis Household. Household. Not utility, not gas, not electric. Household. I scrolled further and froze. My pension deposit, the one I rely on to get by, was linked to a joint account I never remember authorizing. My name was on the paper, but I sure as hell didn't sign up for it. That's when I remembered a little incident back in the spring. Cara had slid a form across the kitchen island, saying it was just a helper form at the bank, so tellers could talk to her if I ever got sick. I skimmed it, told her no, and thought that was the end of it. But I had taken a photo of that form on my phone because something about it made my gut churn. Now, months later, that photo looked less like paranoia and more like evidence. The more I dug, the worse it got. HOA mail that had been shoved into a drawer, letters with my name listed as owner of record. I'd co-signed without realizing it, late fees stacking up. And then there was the credit card statement, a shiny Best Buy card in my name with a balance over $2,400. The last charge? A gaming laptop. I don't game. But Trent sure does. That's when the words from Thanksgiving came back to me. Grown men pay their way. He had smirked when he said it. Smirked. While he used my credit and my pension to keep his lifestyle afloat. You'd think that was enough betrayal for one man to uncover in a day. But then came the moment that changed everything. I remembered that Nest camera in the dining room. Cara had installed it for home security. What she forgot was that it recorded audio. I pulled up the cloud history. There it was. Thanksgiving night. Cara's voice sharp and cold. He's in the way, Trent. Once his Medicare Part D kicks in, we'll move him out. That place off Tylersville, $400 a month, 4 to a room. Trent chuckled on the recording. As soon as he's gone, we'll actually have privacy. And his checks? We'll reroute them until he's settled. Hearing it didn't feel real. My own daughter talking about me like I was dead weight. My son-in-law treating me like a checkbook with legs. I sat there in my room with the glow of the laptop on my face, the recording playing over and over, and I felt something inside me click. The humiliation at the dinner table wasn't an accident. It wasn't stress. It was part of the plan. Break me down, make me feel like a burden, and when I was too tired to fight, shuffle me into some low-rent nursing home so they could keep the house, the mortgage, the life they thought they deserved. Here's the part some folks might judge me for. I didn't call them out right away. I didn't storm downstairs and start screaming. I picked up my phone and dialed one number, not Cara's, not Trent's, but Mike's, my old buddy from the Union Hall, who now works compliance at a regional bank. I told him, hypothetically, what I was seeing. He didn't laugh. He didn't hesitate. He told me this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was elder financial exploitation, and banks are required by law to file reports when they spot it. He said, Jim, document everything. Line by line, don't tip your hand yet. So I did. I printed every statement. I saved the Nest audio. I kept that photo of the so-called helper form. I slid it all into a manila envelope and tucked it in the bottom drawer of Linda's old desk. That night, when Cara knocked on my door to say goodnight, I smiled. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. Because I knew something they didn't. They thought I was just a tired old man, easy to manipulate. What they didn't realize was that every bolt I've turned, every engine I've rebuilt, taught me the same lesson. Everything leaves a trail. And I was about to follow theirs straight to the end. But the question that kept me up that night wasn't how to catch them. It was whether I'd be strong enough to do what came next. Because once I lit the fuse, there was no going back. The morning after I spoke with Mike, I drove to the Fifth Third branch on Tylersville. I carried my manila envelope like it was dynamite. Walking through those glass doors, I felt the same nerves I used to get before a big repair job, when you're not sure if the engine will turn over or explode. The teller smiled politely, asked how she could help. I told her I wanted a full statement of any account with my name on it. She pulled it up, then paused, her eyes flicking back and forth across the screen. Finally, she said, "Sir, for privacy, the other party will need to be present." Other party? My heart dropped. What other party? I asked. She looked nervous, leaned over to whisper to her manager. The manager came out, shook my hand, and his eyes told me more than his words. Something was very wrong. I signed the forms, and they printed out reams of transactions. Page after page of withdrawals. Venmo transfers. Debit card swipes I never made. Best Buy, Target door, dash. All draining my pension. Here's the part that made my stomach turn. On the back page was a digital signature, my own name scrawled in shaky letters. Only it wasn't mine. Someone had copied it, and they had used it to add Kara as a co-holder. That helper form I'd refused to sign? She must have slipped in another version and filed it anyway. I walked out of that bank with the envelope heavier than when I'd gone in. Heavier with proof, heavier with betrayal. When I got home, I sat in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel, staring at their house. My house too, technically, since the HOA paperwork still listed me as owner of record. That's when I noticed another detail. The HOA fine notices had my name at the top. If they defaulted, the association could come after me. And the mortgage? It wasn't as current as they'd led me to believe. I went inside quietly, climbed the stairs, and opened the Nest app again. This time, I scrolled deeper. I found clips from earlier in the month. Kara on the phone with Trent. "We can't keep bleeding like this. Dad's pension is the only steady thing. Once he's gone, we'll be free." Those words, "once he's gone," cut deeper than the Thanksgiving insult. They weren't just humiliating me now. They were planning a future without me in it. That night, I waited until they went to bed. Midnight. House quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the faint tick of the Nest thermostat, locked at 67 degrees. I sat at the dining table, spread out every document, and started to piece together the puzzle. It wasn't random overspending. It was a system. My pension flowed in, swept out to their joint account, and from there, siphoned to cover Trent's debts and Kara's Amazon orders. And the cruelest twist? They had routed some of those payments to cover the very mortgage I had helped them secure with Linda's life insurance money. I wasn't just their safety net. I was the rope keeping their entire life from collapsing. At 2 a.m, I got up, tucked the papers back into the envelope, and slipped them into my old workbench toolbox in the garage. That box had held wrenches, torque meters, ratchets for 40 years. Now it held my revenge. The next day, Kara knocked on my door. She wore that sweet smile, the one that used to melt me when she was little. "Dad, could you spot us rent this month?" Just until Trent's commission clears, my hands shook, but not from weakness. I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot from the Nest audio. $400 a month, 4 to a room. Her smile collapsed. She stammered, "Dad, it's not what it sounds like." "Oh, it sounds exactly like what it is," I said. She went pale, backed out of the room. For the first time in years, she didn't have a comeback. That evening, I sealed the USB drive with the Nest clips, the statements, the forged signature into a new envelope. I walked into the bank again, slid it across the desk to the manager. "File whatever reports you're required to file," I told him. "I'll handle the rest." Walking out, I felt lighter. But I also knew what came next would tear our family apart for good. Once the system started grinding, it wouldn't stop. And as I pulled into the driveway that night, headlights washing over the house where my grandkids slept, I couldn't stop one thought from gnawing at me. Was I protecting myself, or was I about to blow up the only family I had left? When I left that bank with the SAR envelope filed, I knew I'd just kicked the first domino. But what I didn't expect was how fast everything would fall. The very next week, I noticed the mood in the house shift. Trent wasn't strutting around anymore. His phone calls got louder, angrier. Kara avoided me completely, whispering in the kitchen when she thought I couldn't hear. On Wednesday, I caught a glimpse of a letter on the counter. Insufficient funds. Mortgage autopay failed. I didn't touch it. I just walked past, smiling to myself. The first domino had landed. A few days later, the HOA president, a Vietnam vet named Carl, pulled me aside at Quaker Steak and Lube. He slid his beer across the bar and said, "Jim, you know there's a lien notice posted at the community board with your name on it, right?" My stomach tightened, but then he grinned. "Don't worry. Folks around here know you've been carrying their weight. It's their mess, not yours." That's when it hit me. The grapevine was turning against them, and in a small Ohio cul-de-sac that can ruin you faster than a foreclosure. I went home and shut off the last card I had, running their bills. Spectrum Internet. By Friday night, the kids were crying because Netflix wouldn't load. Kara came pounding on my door, demanding to know what happened. I opened it just enough for her to see my face. Calm. Cold. "You told me whoever doesn't contribute doesn't eat," I said. "Well, I don't live here anymore, so I don't contribute." Then I shut the door. Saturday morning, 2 uniformed officers from Westchester PD showed up. Not for me, for them. The Best Buy fraud report had landed, and the officers wanted a statement. I sat at the dining table with my coffee while Trent stumbled through excuses. "It was a misunderstanding. Dad said we could use it. The cops didn't buy it." They left with a copy of the security footage showing him swiping the card. The walls were closing in. But the real reckoning came at church. Crossroads was packed for Sunday service. After the music, Pastor Dave asked if anyone had prayer requests. That's when Kara stood, tears in her eyes, and said, "Please pray for our family. We're going through a financial crisis because my father has abandoned us." The audacity made my blood boil. But then something inside me snapped into place. I stood too. 64 years old, voice rough but steady. "Pastor, if I may give context." The whole room turned. I walked to the front, envelope in hand, and laid out the truth. I didn't rant. I didn't scream. I just read the facts. The Kroger receipt from Thanksgiving, $118.43. The Nest audio, $400 a month, 4 to a room. The forged signature on the Fifth Third account. The Best Buy charge for the gaming laptop. When I finished, you could hear a pin drop. Then Carl, the HOA vet, stood up in the back and said, "That man rebuilt my snowblower last winter for nothing. He's no burden." Heads nodded all around. Kara sank back into her pew. Trent's face went crimson. That moment didn't erase the humiliation I'd felt on Thanksgiving, but it flipped the script. For once, I wasn't the old man begging for a seat at the table. I was the one setting the record straight. By the end of the week, the fallout was everywhere. The bank froze their joint account. Their Venmo bounced. Mortgage calls came daily. The PTA moms stopped answering Kara's texts. And Trent? His application for a real estate license stalled after the prosecutor flagged the pending identity theft report. I thought maybe they'd apologize, maybe own up. Instead, they doubled down. Kara showed up at my door with Ben on her hip, pleading, "Dad, please!" "Just come back to the way things were. We're drowning." I bent down to Ben's level. "Buddy, you've got nothing to worry about. Grandpa loves you. None of this is your fault." Then I looked at Kara. "You called me dead weight. You planned to dump me in a home and sell off Linda's dresser for gas money. You don't get to cry foul now," she tried to protest, but I pulled out the USB drive with all the audio and waved it gently. "Every word you said is saved. Don't make me hit play," her eyes filled with rage, not remorse. She grabbed Ben's hand and stormed off. That night, as I sat on the porch, sipping bourbon from Linda's old glass, Trent's truck screeched into the driveway. He jumped out, red-faced, fists clenched. "You think you can ruin us, old man? You're nothing without us." I stayed seated, calm. "Careful, Trent. You're threatening me in front of witnesses." Patricia from next door had already stepped out with her phone raised. He froze. then spat on the ground and peeled out of the driveway. The tires squealed, but all I heard was desperation, because now the roles had reversed. They weren't the ones holding me hostage with money. I was the one holding the receipts that could finish them, and I hadn't even used the sharpest weapon yet. I thought Trent's rage on the driveway was the final card, but it wasn't. The real collapse came in July. I was sitting on the Legion post patio with Carl when he slid a folded flyer across the table. "Jim, thought you'd want to see this." It was a foreclosure notice, public record, taped right to the courthouse board. The Hollis Venner house, auction scheduled for September. My name wasn't on the debt anymore. The bank had scrubbed me once the fraud report stuck, but Cara and Trent's was, in big, bold print. The shame wasn't private anymore. Every neighbor who drove by that cul-de-sac saw the notice staked in the yard. By August, the moving truck showed up. No goodbye, no explanation. Just boxes tossed in the back of a rented U-Haul, while the kids sat on the curb, confused. I stayed on my porch, hands clasped, and didn't say a word. Then came the letter. It arrived in early September, careful handwriting I recognized from Cara's grade school days. Inside, she admitted everything: the forged signature, the pension siphoning, the plan to push me into that home. She wrote that Trent had grown bitter, even violent, since the foreclosure, snapping at her the same way she once snapped at me. "Now I understand what you lived with, Dad," she wrote. "Now I feel it too." For a moment, I felt a pang of pity. That's the curse of being a parent. You always want to forgive. But taped to the bottom of the letter was the final twist, a copy of a police summons. Trent had been charged with felony identity theft, his mugshot now plastered on the Butler County booking log. I didn't even have to push the case. The system had chewed him up all on its own, off the very paper trail they built. In October, I hosted my first Thanksgiving at the American Legion. I rented the hall, ordered turkey from City Bird, pies from Buskin. I set out Linda's heirloom plate at the head of the table with a small card. For anyone who was ever told they didn't contribute, veterans, widows, and a couple of neighbors who couldn't face their families showed up. The laughter was real, the food warm, and for once, nobody looked at me like I was a burden. A week later, I heard through Carl that Cara had moved into a cramped two-bedroom in Middletown. She was sleeping on the couch, the kids sharing a room. She'd lost her place in the PTA, the church circle, the neighborhood that had once been her stage. And Trent? Word was he pled out. Probation plus restitution. His dreams of a real estate license were gone. That was the closure I hadn't even dared hope for. Not me screaming or gloating, but their own actions catching up to them. I didn't need to burn their world down. They handed me the matches and lit it themselves. I've kept Cara's letter in my desk drawer. Maybe one day I'll answer it. Maybe not. But when I sit at that Legion table, surrounded by people who treat me with dignity, I know I've already won. The lesson I carry is simple but sharp. Love doesn't excuse exploitation, and silence isn't respect. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself, and maybe even for the ones who wronged you, is to let them live with the wreckage they built. Have you ever been in a situation where family turned their back on you, or made you feel like you didn't belong at your own table? Share it in the comments. I'll be reading. And if this story spoke to you, stick around for the next one. I've got more to tell.